Okay.
Yes and yes. We're now live on YouTube as well. And it'll also be broadcast on the In the Air Tonight website.
Oh my goodness me.
Right, so I'm going to make right. Well, I'll start the webinar, and then I'm going to make Mark the official host, and then I have to duck out. So good luck, chaps. Hope it all goes well.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for your
Andy.
technical assistance.
Hope it goes
As
well,
usual.
Right, yeah. Webinar's now live, so people will start arriving.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right. Right, gents. Have fun.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Cheers.
Thanks, Andy. Oh, we're looking at his chair. Look at that.
Oh, it's my 6th scale MiG-15.
Wow. I'm sure somebody's going to ask you to lift that up and
not without my truss.
See that?
Oh, what have you got going there then, Charlie?
No, it's a tatty old 5th scale Spitfire.
Oh, nice.
2,500 rivets so far.
Oh, my goodness me.
I'm being boring. Very boring. Well, if I took my background off, you can see all the toys behind me, but I've got the background on at the minute. It's lovely how we all sit in our workshops. Which kit is that, Duncan?
Sorry?
Which kit is that?
It's the old Global Jet Club one that's disappeared. Right. I've also got the Compath, the 5th scale one, but I haven't built it yet. I love the MiG-15, and I've got a little EDF one as well.
Very nice.
What's going in that then?
It's got a P100 in it.
All right.
See you later. Just saying goodbye to my good lady. She's just nipping out.
Sensible girl.
We'll give it another minute. Give it another minute or so, Duncan. And
okay, yeah, sure, no problem.
We've got just under 100 in at the moment, so. Yeah, I like the MiG-15 as well, Duncan. Nice aeroplane.
You see the box in the background there?
Yeah.
That's a little EDF one, which is on 3S, but it will ROG. If you put it on the ground and open the throttle, it's gone. It's a scale speed of about Mach 3, I reckon. It's really quick. It's a little 3-bladed fan. It's an old Czechoslovakian kit, Alpha model with an F as opposed to a PH. It's a very expensive piece of foam, but the performance is spectacular.
Right. Well, I think we're just about at the 100 mark at the moment, so I think we'll kick off and welcome all the attendees who are in at the moment. I'm fairly certain there's going to be a few more who are going to join us over the next few moments. But I'd like to welcome everybody to the second instalment of In the Air Tonight. Just before I introduce Duncan to actually take over the show, just would like to go through a little bit of housekeeping with everybody. We welcome questions and answers. The profile of the session is that the presenter will talk for circa half an hour, 40 minutes. Thereafter, we're going to open the floor up for Q&As. You'll see on the bottom of your screen and Zoom there's a Q&A box. there's also a chat box as well. By all means, in the chat box, make comments through the talk, through the chat. But I think, please, if you've got any questions, if you can put them in writing in Q&A, what we'll do is we'll make sure we'll try and get to all of the questions over the last sort of 15-20 minutes of the session. And you know, feel free to ask whatever questions you like of Duncan. And also we've got Kevin and Charlie Cox here as well, who are going to they'll probably intervene and answer some of your questions as well. So I'll kick off now. Just to say welcome, Duncan McClure. He's going to talk to you about the achievement scheme, which I think majority will all know about, but we'll leave it to Duncan to carry it through. Thank you, Duncan.
Good. Just one request from me, please. Except for Duncan, could everybody with a live mic please mute it, and then we'll get no background noises coming in.
They're all muted anyway, I think.
Good. I'm just about to mute my own.
Yep.
So if the dog starts barking, it won't come in across what Duncan's going to say.
Yeah.
There we go. I'm going off air now.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to start sharing screen so we can crack on with the presentation. Can everybody see that okay? Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight. As Mark said, I'm joined by two other members of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee tonight, in the form of Charlie Cox and Kevin Watson, and we'll be more than pleased to take your questions at the end of the presentation. I've put on the screen here, you can see at the moment, the achievement scheme, or everything you ever wanted to know but were too afraid to ask. It's rather strange, actually, that quite often we come across members and candidates for tests who are actually a little bit intimidated by talking to examiners. And actually, I want to kind of dispel that myth right from the start. We're all just normal modelers like the rest of you, and we're only too pleased to help members who are perhaps practicing for a test or keen to get involved or don't know what it's about and want to ask questions. So it's the same is true for all the members of the ASRC, only too pleased to help. So don't be afraid to come up and ask us questions and get involved so that we can help. Anyway, without further ado, let's move on. So overview, these are the things that I'm going to cover tonight, touch on. First of all, I'm going to look at the basics of the scheme, the sort of philosophy behind it and how it's run. I'm also going to look at a few of the developments over the last few years, just to show you all how busy we are, but also to try and demonstrate that one of the important roles of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee is to make sure the scheme is current and it keeps apace with modern developments in our sport, with all the technological advances, so that it's available to as wide a range of members and the models they fly as possible. And also then to probably what I wouldn't mind betting quite a lot of you have joined tonight for, which are the top 10 tips for preparing for a test, that I have to confess are a compilation of the thoughts of my collective colleagues on the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. So we did a little bit of a survey and pulled together the top 10 that I'm going to present to you later on. But looking forward to seeing what you all think about all the aspects of this. I looked at the advert for this presentation tonight, and I noticed that it says at the end I'm going to wind up with a little bit of a description of the roles of examiners and instructors. Well, actually, that's something that I'm going to capture during the body of the presentation. So rather than it being a summary at the end, it's well, you'll see when it comes up in the main body. So without further ado, I'm going to now press on. So we're going to start off by looking at some of the basic philosophy behind the scheme. The most important thing is it's not a license. This scheme is all about personal achievements, and the BMFA and the achievement scheme assign absolutely no privileges associated with any of the test certificates. That's not to say that others don't. Many clubs use it as a measure of proficiency, and other organizations also look very kindly on certificate holders. So, but I just make the point that there are no privileges granted from the BMFA as to holders of achievement scheme certificates, and it's entirely voluntary. It's not compulsory at all. We're just trying to provide goals and aims and challenges to encourage our members to improve their performance and competence, and give them a little bit of a challenge. And here's a few bottom 3 points at the bottom of the screen here. A few major important things. So it's been a major contributor to our BMFA safety record over the years, which is reflected in the insurance premiums we pay. In fact, we pay a relatively low premium for the level of cover that we get. If you think it's £27, I think, for £25 million insurance cover, and that's a measure of our safety record and how what's the right word? What's the right phraseology? How low risk our sport is because of people's competence and approach to safety. Other important thing is it has, whether you're a certificate holder or not, it has no implications for your insurance. So there's none of that, oh, your insurance doesn't cover you if you haven't got an A certificate. That's just a common urban myth that we get fed back to us on occasion. It's simply not true. No implications for the insurance, whether you have or don't have a certificate. And very important in recent times, the scheme has been an important element for particularly our CEO to be able to demonstrate to the CEA the competence of our membership. And I'll say a little bit more about that as we get further into the presentation. So some more basics. Other important thing is it's a national standard. So I'm just having a sip of water. And by that, I mean, we do our best to ensure consistency on a nationwide scale. It's not easy, and it will never be perfect. One of the major initiatives we have in terms of ensuring consistency is we get the areas on our behalf to run what we call examiner instructor workshops. These are basically where we'll get a whole bunch of examiners and instructors at a flying field alongside some demonstration pilots who will fly some of the test maneuvers as a demonstration. All the examiners and instructors look on, they all make notes, and then we all compare notes afterwards and see if there are any outliers or discuss any inconsistencies in the scoring or whatever. So it's a very important initiative in terms of doing our best to ensure national consistency nationally. But we have to accept that it will never be perfect, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do our best to get as close as we can. Other important things is the scheme itself is administered entirely by volunteers. So myself and the colleagues on the ASRC Achievement Scheme Review Committee, they administer the scheme, and by that I mean they maintain and develop all the test standards. And myself as scheme controller, my role really is just to make sure that everybody follows the rules. The scheme controller has very little power, but that's my main role. But we're all volunteers, indeed, as are the people who deliver the scheme. All the area chief and club examiners and instructors, all volunteers. So we're all just modelers like you guys. We all just happen to put our hands up and volunteer for a committee at some point. So yeah, that's important. We're not paid employees of the BMFA. How often have I, gone to my PC and seen an email that says, "Oh, when you get to your desk on Monday morning," well, actually, no, I'm just a modeler like the rest of them, as are all the others that deliver and administer the scheme. So that's a very important point. So some more basics. Well, as I hope you're all aware, there are currently 3 levels of certification. We have the A certificate and the basic proficiency certificate, which are often considered to be a basic safe solo standard. They're identical tests, the A certificate, the A test and the BPC. The only difference is the BPC is a good example of a modern development in the scheme where we've modified the scheme to encompass a range of aircraft and systems that a lot of members are starting to, well, that are commercially available and members are starting to fly. And by that I mean the BPC captures aircraft that feature some form of electronic stabilization. Whereas before they were excluded from the scheme, the BPC now captures those. So whether you take an A certificate or a BPC is entirely dictated by the model you present with. The test is the same, but they're tested with different types of models. Then we have the B certificate, which is more advanced, and we have B certificates in, like the A and BPC, in a wide range of disciplines. And then following on from the B, we have the C certificate, which is a specialist endorsement to a B. In other words, you have to have a B certificate before to be eligible to take a C. And we currently offer C certificates in the specialization of aerobatics, scale, and gas turbines. So how's the scheme run? Well, fundamentally, the scheme is run by clubs and areas. It's clubs who nominate club and administer club examiners. It's areas who nominate and administer area chief examiners. And areas have an area coordinator who really is responsible for coordinating all of the activities within the scheme with those areas. So things like the examiner instructor workshops that I mentioned earlier, those are things that will be organized by an area coordinator. And this I think is the most important point. You know, I was talking earlier about volunteers. The club examiners and instructors and the clubbing, and well, all the different levels of instruction, of which I'll say more in a short while. They're absolutely key to the delivery of the scheme at grassroots levels. The scheme wouldn't exist without these guys, and you know, and I'll take the opportunity to thank all of them here. And if I can give you an example, to me, the scheme is all about, if you go out the field on a Sunday afternoon and there's an examiner or instructor there, and they can come over and say, do you want any help? I've been watching you fly. Think you're ready to take your A, or I see that you're struggling with the 2 consecutive rolls in the B certificate or whatever. To me, that's really what drives the scheme forward. And it's these guys that do it, and I think they're absolutely vital. We can't have too many of them. We're doing our best to, we, Achievement Scheme Review Committee, doing our best to help and support and encourage more people to take on the role of being club examiners and instructors, because they are absolutely vital to the scheme and its future. So very important, and just a good opportunity for me to say thanks to all those people. And another important thing about examiners is the examiner roles are their annual appointments. They're not like taking an A or a B test where, unless you do something terribly naughty, you'll have the certification for life. Examiners have to be re-ratified every year, either by their clubs or by their area. And that's so, and we need the clubs and areas to do this, because they're the only people who have the first-hand knowledge of the examiners and instructors, sorry, just examiners here, of the examiners' activities, whether they're still active, whether they're still interested in driving the scheme forward, because you know there will be people who've have perhaps been helping with the scheme for years and want to stand down or whatever, but the clubs are the only people that will know that. So it's absolutely vital that they fulfill that role. But it's very important, and it helps us make sure that the examiners are fresh and are current, because there's been, as I'm sure you appreciate, there have been quite a number of significant developments, particularly in the changes in the law with our activities in recent years. It's very important that examiners remain current. So very important point, examiner appointments are only for 1 year at a time. Okay. Talk a little bit about instructors now. There are actually 4 categories of instruction. Might seem a little bit overly complex, but I'll try and explain. First of all, we have registered club instructors. Now, these are entirely club appointments. There's no test involved, so and also there is absolutely no qualification required to be a registered club instructor. This is in recognition of you know, those stalwart members of clubs who they may not have taken any achievement scheme tests, they may not be involved with the achievement scheme in any way, shape or form, but they're the salt of the earth up the club every Sunday, looking after the newcomers and teaching people to fly. You know, very important role, and that's why we have this category of registered club instructor to recognise that. The next level up is an approved instructor. Now, these are nominated by a club and tested by an area chief instructor in exactly the same way that a club would nominate and appoint a club examiner. But they must have the qualification to be an approved instructor is that they must hold at least an A certificate. So moving on from approved instructors, we have qualified. Occasionally, I used to call these certified instructors, much to the amusement of my fellow colleagues on the ASRC. So qualified instructors. Basically, this is any approved instructor who holds or gains a B certificate. So there are some time qualifications involved, but that's the simplicity of it. So any approved instructor who has or subsequently gains a B certificate will eventually become, after a certain period of time, will become a qualified instructor. And finally, we have area chief instructors who are nominated and appointed by, well, they're nominated by the area and approved by me as controller in exactly the same way as an area chief examiner. But I'm sure I hope you appreciate, again, instructors very important to driving the scheme forward. And we have the two categories of, we have the examiners and instructors. There is a lot of common ground. Many instructors are examiners and vice versa, but we have recognition of the two roles in recognition that the two skills are actually quite different, and you might be a good examiner, but not necessarily the best instructor, and vice versa. That's why the two roles are split. So here's some interesting facts about the achievement scheme. I'm just going to take another sip of water while we take this in. So we have roughly 16,000 of our members who hold at least one certificate. And we also have currently over 20,000 certificates issued to the current membership. So perhaps not surprisingly, it's obvious that we have a number of members who have more than one certificate, but that's, you know, I'm sure we've all experienced that or aware of that. But it's just the number here, 16,000. That's you know, if you consider that we've probably got around 30,000 or 31,000 members, that's roughly half the membership, which is not too shabby, and I'm really pleased to see. We have something like currently 94 area chief examiners spread over the 14 areas, so which includes all of UK and Northern Ireland, sorry, all of England and Northern Ireland. We have approximately 700 club examiners and approximately 3,000 instructors of all flavours. And generally, there's something in the region of 500 new certificates awarded each year, although that number does vary. There's some interesting statistics there. So moving on. So want to now look, well, there's, as you'll see, rather a comprehensive list. This is the first of two slides that list all of the developments, and I'm not going to read them all out. If any of you have any particular questions on any of these recent developments, you know, register them now and ping them to Mark as questions for later. I'll pick up a few that I think are quite pertinent. So one of the ones that I think was important was a flying start here in 2015. This is the new RC flight training manual. So it replaced the old up and away that we'd had for quite some time, which, because it hadn't been maintained, was you know, it had become certain aspects of it had become outdated. So we took the opportunity in 2015 to update it and retitle it to a flying start, so to make it clear to members that it was a very different document. The other one that I'll pick up on, I've already mentioned the basic proficiencies, but at the bottom of the screen is the mandatory questions, which we introduced in 2016 to quite a flurry of activity would be a good description. Not necessarily all positive, but a couple of important observations. First of all, the process of introducing these mandatory questions was merely to formalise the questions. And importantly, none of the mandatory questions were necessarily new. They were all questions an examiner could have asked over the preceding decade. So what we did was, by formally recognising them in the form of the mandatory questions, was really it was an exercise to highlight to the CAA that of how responsibly we took our approach to competency within the achievement scheme. And I think subsequently that's proved to be of great benefit, certainly to the CEO and also to the 16,000 members who are now exempt from having to take the CAA online competency as they currently hold an achievement scheme certificate. One of the other interesting facts out of the mandatory questions, a lot of the negativity on social media were, oh, the mandatory questions, they put people off from taking tests. 2017 was actually a record year for the number of achievement scheme tests. It beats 2016 and 2018 by a substantial margin. So all the naysayers and the doom mongers that it was going to put people off, the data just simply doesn't support it. So, but the important thing was they were not new questions, and they were just there to merely formalise those questions that examiners could have asked in the past. So some more of the recent developments. Again, not going to talk you through all of them. The one that I will pick up on, obviously the guidance videos are quite important, a modern development, proving very popular, but also the line above, the Buckminster events. We started running them in 2018. They've grown in terms of popularity and particularly this year in terms of frequency, because when we were able to run them, the demand was quite high, and we subsequently ran and organised follow-on events midweek to supplement the weekend events we run. And in fact, as it says here, we've got more planned for 2021, COVID and pandemic restrictions permitting. So I think those are key developments that I've just picked out there. But if anybody has any questions about any of the others that I've posted, quite happy to take them with my colleagues at the end. So now, here we go. What I suspect and hope quite a number of you have joined to see. As I mentioned at the beginning, these are collective thoughts from myself and my fellow examiners and instructors on the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. I present them in no particular order, but I'm going to talk about each of the points in turn as I pull them up on the screen. So at number 10, well, most important is read the guidance documents. For all of the achievement scheme tests, and we've got over 23 tests, I think it is, we now have in the portfolio. For all of the tests, there is a very detailed guidance documents. And these are all very mature and highly developed documents. By that, I mean, they've been in existence for quite some time, and we're always tweaking them and adding little bits and pieces if members haven't been quite clear on what particular point was or whatever. So they're highly developed documents, a lot of detail. They might not be the most gripping read, but they do include an awful lot of detail. They're aimed at both examiners and test candidates. So an examiner can read it and see what he's supposed to be looking for in a test, and a test candidate can read it and see exactly what the examiner will be looking for, and perhaps what things they won't view too favorably for that particular maneuver. So a very important reference document. I've got here in brackets, be prepared, and it's a good opportunity for me to mention the Achievement Scheme website. All of the guidance documents are available as free downloads from the BMFA Achievement Scheme website. And alongside those guidance documents, for people who are interested in taking or preparing for the Fixed Wing B certificate, there are a whole series of articles written by Andy Ellison, who some of you may know, and he's a current member of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. And he originally wrote these articles as a series of articles for RCM&E. Now, RCM&E have very kindly agreed for us to be able to publish these on the Achievement Scheme website. And they're all there for members to read. And they go through step by step all the particular maneuvers in the B test. So an excellent reference for anybody who's preparing for or thinks they might be interested in taking a fixed wing B test in the not too distant future. So lots of good reference materials there. That's kind of the message in that particular point. The other important thing is to watch the videos. As I mentioned, we currently have 4 available. We have 2 more in the pipeline, of which I'll say a little bit more later. The current videos cover an introductory video, which is applicable to any test. And then we have 1 for the multi-rotors, and then we have 1 for the fixed wing A and 1 for the fixed wing B. So if you're interested in taking one of those particular tests, then do watch the video as well as reading the guidance document. At number 8, practice, practice, practice is what many of my colleagues like to say on the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. Practice all the maneuvers, and of course, if you're doing it in the UK over a period of time, you're likely to encounter a wide range of weather conditions. So practice all of the maneuvers in a variety, as wide a variety of conditions as you can, and also practice all the other aspects. So like the questions, for example, you can perhaps approach an examiner or instructor. You can practice the mandatory questions with friends or family, or perhaps club mates at the field or whatever. But I can't stress enough the importance of practice. Even if you're an experienced flyer, if you don't routinely fly the maneuvers that are required in the various schedules, and I personally, whenever I go out and fly, I will always practice some of the maneuvers in the B schedule, because particularly as being a scheme controller, somebody is always going to ask me to demonstrate a maneuver, and it's particularly embarrassing if you can't. So when you're practicing, go out and every session when you go out, say, okay, this time I'm going to practice X, Y, and Z maneuvers and go through them. So can't stress the importance of practice too much. Choice of model, a really good one that myself and colleagues on the ASRC, and I'm sure so many examiners and instructors out there are asked, which is the best model for the test? Well, simply, it's probably the model that you've flown the most and you're most familiar with. Fundamentally, the fundamental importance is it must be capable of flying the maneuvers specified for whatever test that you're going to take. You can't present for a test and say, oh, actually, I'm not doing the outside loop because my model won't. My scale model Lancaster won't do an outside loop. Unfortunately, that disqualifies you effectively from being able to take that test. You must present with a model that's capable of flying the prescribed maneuvers for the test. But after that, it's probably, your favorite model, the one you've done all your practicing, the one you know inside out. And it's also linked to the next point I'm going to make, which is kind of sort out the basics. The important thing about the model is that you would surely choose, and my advice always is to prospective candidates, choose the model that makes it easy for you to take the test. Why would you make it hard for yourself? I took my B test many years ago with a classic Watt 4, IC powered. It was capable of doing all the maneuvers, but I had to work hard at some of them. And the example I give here, when anybody ever asks me this question, is I once, in my early days as an examiner, a candidate presented for a B test with a flare puppeteer, which some of you will know, or many of you I'm sure will know, is a sort of semi-scale biplane. And I looked quizzically at the chap who presented. I knew it was a model he flew regularly, and I knew he flew it well. And I asked him, had he practiced? Was he sure it could do all the maneuvers? And he assured me it was. And he flew the test perfectly competently. I'm sure it was very difficult, particularly maneuvers like the outside loop and the 2 consecutive rolls, but he managed it to a comfortably passable standard. But I'm sure the point I'm trying to make is that model didn't necessarily make it easy for him to take the test. Whereas if he'd chosen to do it with an aerobatic, a model designed specifically for aerobatics, it would have been a lot easier. So choose the model that you're comfortable with, choose the model that can fly the maneuvers and that makes it easy for you to take the test. And then the next point is also very important. Sort out all the basics with the model in advance. You shouldn't be rocking up for a test with a model with a new engine that you haven't run in, or you've had difficulty setting the needle valve, or a model that's untrimmed, or that you haven't done a range check on. You should always have done a range check on before you fly it, of course, and make sure that the fail-safe set, because these are all things that the examiner could ask you to demonstrate on the day. So, and they're things that it's easy to do in advance. So take the advantage of doing that. Kind of like, why wouldn't you, you know? So other important thing, as I mentioned right at the start, take time to talk to an examiner. We're not ogres. We're only too pleased to help. And one of the great things to do with an examiner is to fly a dummy test. If you think you're ready, ask him, can you fly a dummy test? So not a formal test. You won't be able to get a certificate at the end of it, but you'll be able to demonstrate all of the maneuvers to the examiner, and he'll be able to critique them, give you positive feedback, or yeah, they all look pretty good, you're ready for the test, or no, those two consecutive rolls, they need to be a little bit slower, or your loop needs to be a little bit rounder, or your rectangular circuit was a little bit triangular, or whatever. But do take the time or the opportunity to engage with an examiner if you can, where you can. If you've got them in within your club, perfect. If your club's having difficulty sourcing an examiner, then that's not quite so easy. But if you can attend one of the area events or one of the Buckminster events where there are a number of examiners present, they'll be only too pleased to help. So why not tap into their knowledge and expertise? And the other thing as well is, if it is, one of your regular club examiners, you will get a little bit of an insight into perhaps his little favorite things that he likes to include in the test, or and that's a useful insight into the psyche of your particular examiner. The other important thing I would say is to develop a routine. If you read the guidance documents, it will talk about how the examiner will be looking to see how you position the model in the air for the next maneuver. And by develop a routine, a very important point I need to make, it's not a question of, none of the achievement scheme tests are designed to be turnaround aerobatics. It doesn't matter, within reason. It doesn't matter what you do between maneuvers, and it doesn't matter how long you take to position or whatever, but it makes sense for you to develop a routine so that you know perhaps that after one maneuver you're going to do a procedure turn to position for the next or whatever, so that come the day of the test it all really flows quite nicely and quite logically. And it doesn't just apply to what you do in the air. It applies to all the good things you do on the ground. So your pre-flight checks, your pit discipline, and checking out the model, all those sort of things. Develop a routine for those, and most importantly, follow it on the day. And that's my next point, is don't do anything different on the day. So why would you? You've done all this good preparation, you've got routines for your pit drill, for your checks, everything on the ground, you've developed a routine for in the air. Stick to it, don't get distracted, and do your best to, and certainly don't do anything different on the day. If you have the opportunity, one of the things I always recommend that prospective candidates do is get to the field, perhaps book your test in the afternoon, get to the field in the morning, and get yourself a couple of anchor flights in so you can assess the weather conditions, etc., before you do the test for real in the afternoon. Because, and another aspect of don't do anything different, good example is the examiner will tell you that you're allowed to have a helper. But if you've done all your practicing and developed your routines where you don't have a helper, don't suddenly decide, just because the examiner said to you that you're allowed a helper, don't suddenly decide to have a helper, because if you do, it's not something you're used to, and B, there are certain pitfalls in doing that. So most important, develop a routine and then stick to it when you come the day of the test. And another very important thing, particularly, well, again, important or as much on the ground as when you're in the air, is don't rush the test. As I've already said, it doesn't matter if you take a couple of circuits to position after one maneuver for the next. You'll get no time pressures from the examiner, and it's very important that you get, you know, the positioning for the maneuver is just as important as the maneuver itself, and the examiner will be watching for that. So if perhaps the positioning hasn't gone quite right, just go around and do it again. And even better, say to the examiner, oh, actually, I was a little bit close, or I was a little bit far out for my positioning there. I'm going to go around and position again for the loop, if you don't mind. The examiner will take that as a really positive sign. But most importantly, don't rush. Take your time. And the other most important thing is communication. And I mention this because it's not unusual in the club environment. If all your mates know that you're going to be doing your test, that they all stop flying. To make it, in theory, to make it easy for you, but also to watch and see what's going on, because some of them may be wanting to take their test in the future. That's a bit of a double-edged sword. It helps in one way because you may not be so concerned in terms of integrating with circuit traffic, etc. Personally, as an examiner, I like to see tests conducted. I like to see other people flying while I'm conducting a test, but it's not something an examiner can insist on. So that's the positive side, is, you know, you don't have a busy circuit to contend with. The downside is that there are other modelers or other flyers close to you in the pilot box that would perhaps stimulate your normal good communications. So, you know, going out on the strip, taking off, dead stick, landing, all those kind of calls that you would make instinctively, perhaps, with other pilots stood by you. If they're not there and under the pressure of the test, you might actually forget to say them. So try and remember to communicate as if other flyers were flying, even if they weren't. Examiners will be looking for it, and it's an important aspect of the test. So there we go. Those are our top 10 tips. There are more things I'm sure I could have said, and my colleagues may pick up on, and I'm more than happy to pick up on any of those aspects in the Q&A at the end. So I'm going now to move on and look at the final part of the presentation, which is looking at, you know, what we've got planned for the future. Just a few things. So as I hope some of you will be aware, we've got more guidance videos planned for the future. We've already filmed the flying sequences for the helicopter A and B certificates. We just have the editing to do and the insertion of some graphics, rather like the graphics that you can see in the fixed wing A and B. We've been, the pandemic has affected these as it has many things, but we're hoping to be able to introduce these or publish these early next year in time for the flying season. Other important things for the future, the Buckminster events have really proved very popular. Even the ones that we were able to hold with restricted numbers because of COVID in the tail end of this year, before the recent lockdown. We're looking to, as I've already indicated, we have more dates booked for 2021 that we hope we'll be able to run, and we will run more midweek events dependent on the demand. So while we always have demand, we will run those events. And one of the other things that we're considering is, rather like the examiner instructor workshops, are these something that we could get areas to run regionally to save people who Buckminster may be rather a long round trip. If we can run them regionally as well, that would be absolutely great, because they are proving very popular. Already mentioned roadshows as one of the recent developments. Traditionally, roadshows have been members of the ASRC travel to a particular location in the country. We typically do 2 regions a year, and we go on a Saturday and deliver achievement scheme materials, much like I've done here tonight, but to a limited audience gathered from the local area. Obviously, we weren't able to do those this year because of the pandemic. And so what we did was we modified the materials so we could deliver them on Zoom. We did something like something like a dozen or so presentations that we ran on a Tuesday night at 7:30, much like this. They were extremely popular, and we reached a far greater audience than we could have ever done with the roadshows in their traditional format of basically driving around the country and chatting to people in the local area. So I think that's a real positive for the future. I remember one of our sessions earlier on in the year where we had attendees from Northern Ireland, we had attendees from Scotland and Cornwall all at the same presentation. And we typically had somewhere between 50, 60 and over 100 attendees on some of the occasions. So we reached a fantastic audience, and I think it's a really good way of spreading the word to a much wider audience in a much easier digestible format. You know, we can all sit at home in the comfort of our own home without having to travel. We can have a brew and listen to what everybody thinks. It's really, really positive for the future. And finally, it'd be wrong of me not to mention the Article 16 authorization, which I hope you will appreciate is how we will be operating under the EASA regulations in the future. And I mentioned this here at the end of the presentation because we now know that there will be grandfather rights to all existing achievement scheme certificate holders. And if anybody that has passed an achievement scheme certificate before the 31st of December this year will be exempt from any CAA requirements in terms of demonstrating competency going forward. Unfortunately, it's grandfather rights. So anybody that takes their test after the 31st of December this year, the situation will be different. But it's a good indication of the measure of the competency that the CAA feel our members demonstrate, or those members that have gained an achievement scheme certificate. So I think that's just about everything I wanted to say. I hope you've all found it useful. I'm going to hand back to Mark now if I stop sharing, and he will open the floor to questions which myself and my fellows from the ASRC will do our best to field. So
right.
Stop sharing.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you.
Is that all okay, Mark?
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Cool, thank you.
We have a string of questions, so if I can ask all the panelists to unmute, I may wish to help you out for a few moments while you recover. Mark Fricker, he says, does passing the BPC confine the pilot to flying stabilised models only?
Shall I take that one?
Yeah, go on then, Chris. I'm sorry, we didn't introduce you earlier. This is Chris Bradbury. He's the current chairman of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. No pressure,
sorry,
Chris.
I was just coming in. Yeah, essentially.
Oh, was Chris's broadband gone?
Yeah,
it's only if your club impose any specific restrictions on what you can and can't fly. So, for example, there are many clubs that say you can't fly unsupervised until you've obtained an A certificate, as an example. But in terms of the BMFA, your insurance is valid for any aircraft that you fly. There is no limitations on what you can and can't fly. It's just, they're there as a personal achievement, essentially.
Thanks, Chris. Sama Al-Tahan, what size range would models under scale category for C certificate be?
There's no size limitation other than it has to be over a kilo.
Right, fantastic. Well, we're heading over to Norfolk now. Mr. Ian Nelson, refresh my memory. Is there a formal curriculum to appoint the different instructor categories?
The question is there?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And Ian, were you not paying attention? I know, Ian. Sorry, we are friends. I'm not slagging him off. Yes, I mean that was part of the presentation. There are 4 categories of instructor. First of all, we have the club instructor. That's purely a club appointment, so it's not something that's administered or controlled by within the achievement scheme. And then we move on to an approved instructor who is tested by an area chief. And so that's the first level of instructor where there's a formal test involved. And in order to be to qualify to take that test, the instructor or the candidate has to currently hold an A certificate. The next level up is the I mustn't say certified, qualified instructor, and that's an approved instructor who holds or gains a B certificate. And then following on from that, we have area chiefs. Does that help, Ian? If not, give me a call after the meeting or whatever. If you've got some candidates or whatever, quite happily talk you through the process.
Thank you. Well done. Chris Bond asked, is there a preferred number of area chief examiners in any one area? And what is the process for a club to apply for a club examiner to become an ACE?
The area, just kind of in reverse, area chief examiners are area appointments. Areas are reasonably always looking for area chiefs if the club thinks it has a suitable candidate, and the way they do that is they just approach the area via the secretary or the area coordinator. What was the first part of the question again, Mark? Remind me.
Sorry, is there a preferred number of area chief examiners in any one area?
Good question. No, there's no hard and fast rule, but the recommendation is that an area maintain at least one area chief examiner per 10 clubs within the area. Now, area sizes in terms of clubs vary quite significantly. Some areas have as little as sort of 30, 40 clubs. Other areas have sort of over 100. So some areas may have, a dozen or so area chiefs, and some may only have half a dozen. But the onus is, or the responsibility is kind of on the area committee to maintain enough area chiefs to effectively deliver the scheme within the area. The criteria, of course, not all the area chiefs will necessarily be available at the same time. Some guys may be away on holiday. Areas are quite big, so you need a reasonable geographic distribution of areas. But so the guidance is one per 10 clubs. But if an area had nearly twice that number, there wouldn't necessarily be a problem.
Fabulous, thank you.
Okay.
Now this one is one I would probably ask you, but it's come from an anonymous attendee as well. So if during an exam you fluff a manoeuvre,
yep,
can you retry it during the same flight?
Yes, is the simple answer.
Fantastic.
And what would be really good, if you fluffed it, say so. So if you look, oh, actually, that one didn't go very well. I think I can do better. Would you mind me doing it again? And any examiner will take that. If you can be self-aware during a test and make that kind of declaration to the examiner, that will actually score highly, because the examiner, it shows that not only under the pressure of taking the test, that you're able to have that capacity to think, do you know what, that really wasn't very good, and rather than press on regardless, you say so and repeat it. Equally, if the examiner isn't happy, he or she may well ask for you to repeat the maneuver. That doesn't generally become a problem with most examiners until they get to the second or third maneuver where they're asking you to repeat it. If it gets to that stage, I can't speak for individual examiners, because it without actually witnessing the test in person, it's very difficult. But generally, I would think that if an examiner is asking you to repeat more than 2 or 3 maneuvers, they're probably at the point of saying, terribly sorry, let's turn this into a bit of a practice session and we'll have another go at the test later on. It'd be interesting to see how my fellow colleagues on the ASRC, what their view on that. So I'll shut up now and let them chip in.
I'm about you, Duncan. If somebody makes a mistake on 1 or 2 maneuvers, a minor mistake, you might let them have a second to go. If they're doing 2 or 3 maneuvers being repeated, or indeed if there's one maneuver that they've had to repeat 3 or 4 or 5 times and they've still not got it. So it can be one maneuver that can be the downfall if it's enough repeats, or like you say, 2 or 3 maneuvers, then yeah, you turn it into practice and have another go.
Cool.
That's exactly what I do as well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Lovely.
Another
Okay.
question, Duncan, you mentioned Article 16, and a question is from Richard Wood. If someone passes their A test after the 31st of December this year, what will they need to do in addition for authorization?
They'll either need to do the RCC, which is the BMFA's competency test, online competency test, or the CAA equivalent.
Right, thank you. Mike Sun asks, for an ACE, are there qualified instructor standards forms drawn up or available yet to fill in after a test?
For an ACE or ACI? Sorry, what?
ACE,
Can you read that again, Mark?
sorry, ACE.
Yeah. There's a ACEs aren't tested. They're area appointments. Yeah.
Okay. Ian Nelson's come back with something, and I'll pass that on later. he's right. I've got a load in the chat box here, so I'm going to scoot through some of these. I'm not clear on the model. I'm not clear. Sorry, I am not too clear on the model I can fly for a test. I've mainly learnt on a Bixer type prop pusher. Is this okay, or does it have to be something heavier?
The criteria for a fixed wing, power fixed wing test is that the model has to be over a kilo, including the battery.
It also needs undercarriage essentially to do a round takeoff.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It also mustn't have any form of electronic stabilization to be eligible to take an A test. Okay. So something like that he describes the Bixler. The problem there is it doesn't have an undercarriage. So as Chris says, that would he would have to, the test would be he will be awarded the BPC at the end of the test as opposed to an A.
Right, Nick Johnson to all. Regarding resubmissions and yearly examiner ratification, if the club forgets to do this yearly, does this title just keep rolling over?
No, it's a little bit embarrassing. Clubs need to be aware of their responsibilities. So if a club doesn't re-ratify an examiner through an administrative error, they effectively remove that particular individual's examiner qualification. Now, in recent years, because we've had the change from a paper system to the electronic membership, the new membership database. There have unfortunately been one or two examples of where, the club's got a new secretary, perhaps, wasn't aware of what the process was supposed to be. And what I've done as scheme controller is actually said, okay, so long as the club can write to me and explain to me that this has been an administrative error, during these sort of times of change, we will reinstate the examiner status. But really, clubs need to be aware of their responsibility. As I said during the presentation, it's very important. We rely totally on clubs to administer the scheme for us, because it's really only them that know. They're at the coalface, as it were. They're at the sharp end, knowing whether the examiners are staying current, whether they're staying active, and all the rest of it. So we need them to be able to tell us that the individual characters are suitable to continue in the role, but they need to be aware of their responsibilities in terms of the administrative side of the scheme. But we'll do our best to help. If anybody's not sure, any club secretaries out there not sure exactly what you're supposed to be doing, particularly Andy Simmons, the club support officer, he has a non-voting seat on the Achievement Scheme Review Committee, so he understands all these things. So take the opportunity to contact one of the committee or indeed Andy, and we'll do our best to help out. We're not here to be awkward or to put obstacles in the way. In fact, just the opposite. But we do need to follow the system because it's there so that we can make sure that people are fresh and current. Sorry, that was rather a long-winded answer.
No, that's a good one. No, that's cool. Thank you. Look, there's a couple of questions which are on a similar tone. So Terence Jones asks, club examiner ratification is done on a yearly affiliation renewal of the club up until now. This has always been a hard copy, would presume it will go digital sometime?
As far as I'm aware, it is digital.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. But
yeah.
Okay. Right, let's find another one. As a club examiner, it is the club that submits its exam. Is it the club that submits its examiners for re-ratification?
Yes, yes. I mean, quite often you've got examiners are committee members, but essentially the role is performed by the club committee.
Brilliant. If you have a model that is underweight when new, but when the test is being taken is over 1 kilogram due to repairs and is demonstrated at the test time, would you allow the test to go ahead?
Yeah, yes. If it's so, I mean, my things like the electric foam Watt 4, for example, they are very close to the 1 kilo limit. If you put a 2200 3S battery in it, it's just over the 1 kilo. If you put a 3S 1600 milliamp hour battery in it, it would probably be under the 1 kilo. So just put a slightly larger battery if you're close. But unfortunately, so we have to draw a line somewhere, and the 1 kilo is it. But it doesn't matter how what causes the model to be over the 1 kilo. So
brilliant. Joe Baker asks, what about a heli? Question mark. FBL needs a flight controller.
Shall I say that one as Ellie?
yeah, go on, Chris.
Wireless free-axis flight controller is flight-enabling stabilization, not self-automated stabilization. So if you take something like Heli Command, where if you let go of the sticks, it will self-level, or if it's got GPS, it will hold position, that's not flight-enabling, that's additional stabilization. So the average free-axis gyro, if you put, say, 20 degrees of bank on the aileron, release the aileron roll stick, it should stay at 20 degrees of bank. So it's the same for tail gyros, essentially. It's flight enabling as opposed to self-automated flying.
Fantastic. Sorry, I've got one here. Mike's son said, sorry, the question was, as an ace, I tested a candidate for instructor, but there were no standard forms available to fill.
There is an ACI test form.
Yeah.
And I would have to look on the website to make sure it's there.
Yeah.
Maybe Mike's looked for it and it isn't.
I had to adapt.
My advice would be contact Andy because I know it exists.
Fine. I had to adapt the club examiner pass forms for instructor test. So anyway, something you can look into.
Yes, yeah. Well, I know the club. I know the instructor test exists because I wrote it.
Right, and I think this one you answered in your talk earlier. Where do you find the guidance documents?
Okay, they're all on the Achievement Scheme website. You can go direct to the Achievement Scheme website, or you can access it from the main BMFA website. And if you click on, I think it's the downloads, select downloads in the menu bar at the top, then that takes you to all the various documents. And as I said, there's quite a few.
Brilliant.
As well as things like supplementary things like the Be Prepared articles and things like that.
Well, guys, I think you've got through all of the questions, all of the chat questions as well. So unless there's anything you want to sum up with, I think we're closing in on the 1:30. Yeah, we've just gone past it, so we've run over by a minute or two, which is not a bad thing because we're still answering questions.
I'll ask my colleagues from the ASRC if there's anything else that you think is worth expanding on. Kev, you're currently muted at the moment. But
yeah, I think you've covered almost everything there, Duncan. The main thing is for candidates who are unsure of any aspect of the test, please, please, please ask the questions to an examiner and we will try and put it right.
Yeah. And to those clubs that perhaps don't have resident or club examiners of their own, and you feel you're having a difficulty accessing examiners, you can always approach your area coordinators, or indeed just ping an email to me or the rest of the Achievement Scheme Review Committee. Our contact details again are on the website. And if you can't organise something locally, we're only too pleased to help.
Brilliant. Well,
I think the only thing, which may well have been mentioned by Duncan at the very early stage, because it normally is, but I was late because I was naughty. Remember, the achievement scheme is for fun. It's a personal achievement. It's not a test for a license or anything like that. there's nothing other than the certificate awarded for the privilege of doing it. Really, it's purely a personal achievement scheme. So enjoy it and have fun.
Enjoy, yes, indeed. Yeah, I remember when we had one of our first events at Buckminster, and I asked some of the guys for feedback and said, what do you think of the day? Was it what you were expecting? And he went, oh, not really. I didn't expect to have so much fun. And I thought that was a real positive. So yes, please. It's all about enabling. It's not about there are no barriers here. It's just to provide a useful challenge to members, to encourage them to develop and improve. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now.
Well,
but thanks very much, everybody. Good questions, I thought. So everyone was obviously paying attention. All good stuff, and I've been very useful. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And thanks to my fellow members of the committee for joining me tonight and for the support.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Duncan, for the presentation. Leaves me just to wrap the show up, and just to remind everybody that next Tuesday we've got pylon racing with Ollie Witt. So that should be rather sharp and exciting, I would have thought. So look forward to seeing that next Tuesday, and wish you all a great evening. And I think we'll close the show there.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, ASRC.